Culture Catch-up isn't a new idea. It was birthed 5 years ago, and we had this project called Historia. I am amazed to see that our first guest from Historia, Miss Anne Bosso, a friend of African Digital Heritage, who has been holding our hands since the very beginning, is very here. So asante sana, Anne, for also joining us. So Historia then was, it was formed to help new people in the space, but also enthusiasts and just people who want to figure out how to navigate the cultural heritage space in Kenya. So as you can see on your left, Historia was formed from like the word history, and then history, historia in Kiswahili, which is history. So history yangu, history yako, history yetu, because that African Digital Heritage, we believe that history is very much community informed, and it belongs to the history, in as much as at our core, we say that we digitize histories, we wouldn't be here without our communities. And I think thinking just about the power of community building, it has been amazing to work with communities, not just as communities of practice, but also the communities that are our audiences. And so 5 years later, here we are with Culture Catch-up, our new baby that started in August 2023. A few things have changed over the years. So just as by the way, my presentation is going to be like a reel of what the journey has been. Sorry. So this, as you can see, this was our first Historia session. I can see also Elizabeth is here with us. She was in this first Historia session. And I love this picture because as I was going through our archive, you can see at the quote there at the front, at the top where it says, if you can create community, then you can face anything, even if it is extraordinarily painful. When we started the journey, it was, we were just young girls, we still are, I want to believe. You are young girls who are interested in using innovative practices to share our histories, to share our cultures, to share with the world what makes us stand out. And we found that this community was, this space was full of people who were still doing this, but hadn't been acknowledged as African cultural heritage practitioners. So for us, Historia was a space where young people would commune and share. And as you can see in the photo, the audience is pretty young. So these were the first panelists that we have, the first 7 panelists. As I mentioned, we were honored to be joined by Anna Bosso, who is the director and founder of Rusinga Festival. Then we had Brian Gatia, who did Too Early for Birds, who was the brains behind Too Early for Birds with his friend Abu. Then we had Mufasa, who was using poetry to showcase history and also point out social injustices. We had Muhaki, who is the head and founder of Paukwa, who also delved in history storytelling. Then we had Wanjiro Koinange, who's also a co-founder at Bookbank, and our dear friend Mdogo, who is a cartoonist, who also uses like a different form of artistic expression to showcase our historical differences and our historical identities and just what makes us unique. But and so, as I was saying, when we started, the reason as why we started Historia was because we got a lot of young people who'd write to us and say, I love what you're doing, but I don't know how to navigate this space. So we felt that it was only important where we would hold occasional workshops to sit down with each other, to share what our experiences have been, to also learn from the people who have walked before us. And I am honored that as the idea has grown, so has the ADH team grown. I am honored that one of those people is seated here with us, who is my colleague, Wairimú, and she is a curator behind Rajo Kenya. Wairimú, if you can please tell us what, why you decided to maybe approach African Digital Heritage, and what, by the time you were starting Rajo Kenya, you thought community would do for you.
Thank you so much for, throwing the question back my way, for inviting me to be a guest also in this space. But I think for me, when I started off, I was aware of the work Chow was doing first with Save the Railway. And then as it grew into African digital heritage, I was also aware of that. And I think for me, as I started, I think what was a really beckoning call that I saw that really drew me to what Chow and both you and Chow were doing with Save the Railway and African digital heritage is that first and foremost, I could use the tools that I had at hand to explore my history. I didn't have to wait for, $1 million sitting in my bank account to, to do the things that I was interested in or had a passion for. And I think for me, at the beginning, it was very lonely in a sense because there are not that many people like physically in my space that were doing this work. But I think as the work has grown and as I've grown alongside it, I think the essence of community has just become even more important. Also, the fact that music is a collaboration. I mean, music is made in collaboration with people. I mean, from the people who are recording the music to the singer themselves, the people who would be playing an instrument, the people who take the photos of the musicians, as you can see, the people who are behind the sound, the sound setup. It's very much rooted in collectivity. And I think just like riding on that history of what it means to create music within that collective space has also just like really enabled me to think like deeply or think expansively about also what it means to do this work within community. But I feel it's just a very natural flow. It's not like something that I have to like go to school to get another degree from. I think it's very much a natural lived reality. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Wairimú, for sharing. And I hope that the community that you have found and formed over the years has been instrumental in your journey. Um,
Okay. So I think for me, okay. Can you hear me now? I hope you can.
yes.
Yes, yeah. I think for me, I'd also be interested in figuring out for you also what community looked like, not so much in the sense of physical, because I think for me, I also found community within thinkers that shaped the way I went about my work, thinkers in regards to people who wrote books. And so for me, I'd be interested to know for you, even as you were pioneers in this space, who some of those thinkers were that helped, guide the way you went about your work. And then I think I'd also be really curious to know as well, how like the evolution of community looked like for you, like when you started ADH, and the way you envisioned community to look like, has that changed over time? In what ways has it changed? In what ways has it stayed the same? So I think for me, yeah, those two questions I'd really be curious to know as well.
Thanks, Wairimú. Of course, it has changed over the years. 5 years is a long time not to change. So as I began my talk, I was saying that we started at Historia, but now we are at Culture Catch Up. And I put this side by side just to also see what this, take a deep dive into what the thought behind these two kind of ideas were. So when we look at Historia, as I said, it was basically a workshop first, and it was dedicated to young people, young professionals who are just starting out, and also enthusiasts in the cultural heritage space. And it was designed so that they can get skills and knowledge to participate in the cultural heritage sector. And it was based within the Kenyan landscape, right? But now here we are 5 years later, and we've seen that Culture Catch-Up basically is a space for conversation, discovery, and learning for everyone. Here, it's everyone, but when we started Historia, it was just for young people. But now we hope that the Culture Catch-Up will also help us and other people in the space shape our identities and our role in the world. But when we say that other people in the space, in as much as Historia was Kenyan based, Culture Catch Up is very much dedicated to practitioners and enthusiasts in Africa and in the African diaspora. And we hope that this space will help us share what our experiences have been, so that the journey doesn't have to be as hard as it was when we were starting for us. Because at first, we didn't know that what we were doing was memory work. And two, we didn't know who we'll turn to, because unfortunately, when most young people or most people think about memory work, archival work, museums, libraries, and archives, it just sounds like something for old people. But so we hope to build a space that is, one, vibrant, and two, speaks to the realities of the continent. If you look at Africa's population right now, about 60% of its population is youth. So if we really want to preserve this culture and identities, if we really want to preserve our heritage, then we will need to come up with new ideas, new innovative ways of presenting this heritage and memory work to the biggest population. But also above that, I'd also want to say that the reason why Culture Catch Up has evolved, another way that Culture Catch Up has evolved, is because when we started Historia, it was one physical meetings, but Culture Catch Up, we hope that, okay, where we are right now, they're basically online conversations that we hope to have with practitioners from all over Africa. And we realize that everyone now wants to learn from each other. It's not just the youth who want to learn from each other. Even the people who worked before us sometimes reach out to us and ask, okay, so what are innovative ways of doing things? Because again, tech is always evolving. We have new innovations every day that didn't exist over the years. And also our realities are changing. The circumstances that were their realities when they started their programs, when they started the organizations, then are not the same ones right now. So everyone, regardless of when they started their work or what their background has been, I feel needs community.
Yeah, and speaking about kind of like that evolution and that change over time, I'd also be curious to know like what that was for you personally, because I feel like sometimes this work is also very much rooted in kind of like your lived reality away from like the daily, like, and away from like the institutional like perspective or way of going about things. So I'd also be curious to know for you, like personally, what that evolution has looked like.
It has been great, because when we started the work, I want to say that we started with people who are close to us, so friends and family. So Teo and I both come from like really huge families who are interested in history and literature and our identities, but also our friends played like really big roles in helping us connect with people who are in the space. So it started from like, and I loved it then because at least the pressure wasn't there, and you were given an allowance to evolve and to show up as yourself, because these are people who know you and who you are and what your dreams are. But even as we now navigate this space and think about big organizations and organizational structures, I think it has really been amazing to see like the kind of reception we have gotten from the cultural heritage space, both in Kenya, in Africa, and all over the world. People who are interested in our work, people who are interested to answer the 50,000 questions we always have, people who are interested to show up when we call them, to show up as trainers, to show up as speakers in talks that we hold, people who are interested in posting about our work. So I think the evolution has grown because, again, also the scope has grown, but the basis of it is that it's rooted in care and it's rooted in love.
I really love that, because I think that's also something that I picked from you about what it means to go about doing this work with care and with love. And I'd also be really curious to know what it means within that ethos of care and love, what it means to when working with community, to have that balance of you not taking over a project or speaking for people who are able to speak for themselves, like what that balance looked like and how you were able to get to that point of thinking through what does it mean to not so much be an advocate, but more so work hand in hand, like how you arrived to getting to that place and what that has looked like.
Yeah, maybe I'd start from lessons that I got from my previous career experience. So I have experience in the development world, and in the development world is rooted in community care and participatory actions and research. So taking this practice from there really helped us shape our programs to also root our programs in community care and in ethics, such that whatever it is that you're doing, because again, when we say that we're digitizing histories and we say that we're storytelling, these stories are not by us. And also these histories, we do not own these histories, they're owned by the community. So one of the things that, again, is rooted in ADH's practice is how do you care for the community that you work with, the community that you represent, in a way that your models are not extravagant, but they are also, they give back to the community. What practices do you hold such that in as much as you're building this community of practice, can this community of practice also grow and learn with the community that their audiences are, or with the community from whom they take these histories from?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you touched on earlier that as this work has expanded, then definitely, obviously, the community has expanded as well. And so I'd also be really curious to know if there have been any organizations or individuals within this cultural sphere that you admire in regards to the way they go about being in community with one another. And so I'd love to know who some of those organizations are, and also what it is about them that you admire the way they go about their work.
My answer might be biased, one, because I think I am one of the biggest feminists who ever exist. But so one of the organizations that I really admire is the Women's History. This is a consortium of women who are based in Zambia, and they research, preserve, and restore African indigenous knowledge and living histories focused on women. If you're a historian, but also if you're African, you know that African history was transferred and it was redirected down generations through women and through storytelling, but also storytelling sessions were majorly done by women. Unfortunately, when you read about African history, you realize that not a lot of these stories were written by women, and not a lot of these stories contain stories of women. So if it's women who are at the forefront and at the center of trickling down our identities and our heritage, then how come a few years from now we can't find them anywhere when it comes to documentation? And I love the Women's History Museum because even as they go about researching and preserving and restoring African indigenous knowledge, they're looking at what is the place of women and how can they platform the place of women in this histories and this indigenous knowledge. And I also love how they present their work. I'm a huge fan of their podcast, a huge fan of the exhibitions. So if you're here and you're interested in just consuming new content, please look them up. I promise you won't regret it.
Yes, I think for me, I also, when I came across their work, I was completely blown away, because I think that's just a gap that I noticed exists within the musical sphere, in regards to music is that a lot of the narratives that are dominated by men, either in the people who wrote about history or even the people who like feature most, like the most commonly featured, either musicians or producers, most of them is men. So when I saw what the Women's History Museum was doing, I too was like, I was blown away. But speaking kind of like of those challenges in regards to what it means to kind of unearth hard to come across histories, I'd love to know, so what some of the challenges have been as you've journeyed with working in community and how you have navigated those challenges as well.
So I'm going to look at navigating community in two ways. So navigating the community of practice, but also navigating the communities that we work with, the holders of these histories, and also our audiences. So some of the challenges that we have faced while navigating the community of practice is one, we were young girls when we started this work. So it wasn't a majority of the people who were expecting to see the people behind the emails didn't think that it will be girls. So the reception we got was just, okay, these are just toddlers wasting my time, wasting my time. But it has been, so I was thinking about this, and it has been funny to just see what 5 years later the reception has been and how it has changed. While we had this people who look at us as just people who are wasting their time, we also had people who are very receptive and were open to sharing ideas. They were open to collaborating. They were open to doing research together. They were open to co-creating things. And so, which is one of the things that I loved and why I stuck in this space. And so the other thing was about navigating the communities, that is the communities who are the holders of history, and also navigating our audiences. Unfortunately, most of the research that is done in the cultural heritage space is done from people who are in academia. And while the rights and holdings of research are centered on the person who will write the paper, most of these people will not go back to the community to report back on their findings. They wouldn't go back to the community to maybe advocate for these solutions that they found were necessary. So by the time we got to the field, it kind of was hard to navigate the field because communities will see researchers as people who just extract and never give back. But again, it has been, we have been able to work with people who are rooted in community care and also show up in their work with lots of care. And our foot soldiers, as I love to call them, have also been able to help us navigate these communities and break down these barriers.
Thanks for sharing that. I know you have mentioned in regards to care and community that one mark of care is not being extractive and not taking advantage, but I'd love to hear more of what care looks like in addition to what you've shared already, because we've been using the word care a lot. So I think it would be really lovely to expand on what the notion of care means within community as well.
First, I want to believe that care equals ethics if you're in research, but also what does that look like? It looks like getting consent to photograph that old man when you go to field work. It looks like incentivizing them for their time. And here I know that's like it's a contentious point, but I want to believe that since since they contribute to your work, then you should incentivize them. It doesn't have to be money. It can be in other forms. It also looks like it also looks like giving them credit for their connections, giving them credit for the role they played in your research. And one of the things that we are trying to navigate at African Digital Heritage and also advocate for in the space, I think care also looks like going back to the community and reporting what your findings are and trying to build solutions with the community, not just with with your community where your community of research, not just your community of practice. I am hoping that the space will change over the years, where when we find solutions, we are not just putting them behind reports and solving them with people at high level, but also solving them in conjunction with communities.
Have there been people who you've seen actually work in conjunction with communities? I mean, not just existing on high level, but yeah, because I think it'd also be really nice to have like vibrant examples of the way those things are happening, because I think they do. I think those things are happening right now. I don't think it's something that we have to wait like 5 more years for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Top of my mind
Yeah.
and I was so sorry, Anne, for mentioning you 10 times already, but I really love how she's been able to execute Rusinga Festival over the past 12 years. And she does this with the community. The festival is community-led. The festival is community-run. The activities are all community-based. And even when governments come into it, they understand that this is a community function. And for me, that's the perfect example of a community-run program.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And so, yeah, what are your hopes and dreams for the culture catch-up? Because I mean, we always like, dreaming big and working, of course, to achieve those dreams. But yeah, like what do you hope for the culture catch-up to grow into, specifically as it relates to community?
So one of the things that I hope we will get to achieve from the culture catch-up is, one, get to all these audiences that we want to get to. As I mentioned, the culture catch-up has been formulated for practitioners and enthusiasts in Africa and in the African diaspora. So people who are working within the scope of African heritage, regardless of where they are. So it is my hope that we get to expand the scope and hear from practitioners who are in the diaspora, hear from people who are rooted in practice in their home countries. But also apart from that, I would also love to see like a diversity when it comes to the presenters. I'd love to see I'm speaking age, I'm speaking culture, I'm speaking identities. I'd also love to see a diversity when it comes to like their programs and their practice. So thinking digitization, thinking traditional knowledge, thinking traditional practices, innovative ways, you name it, as long as it touches on African culture and African heritage and practice around that. You're welcome. Yeah.
Yes. To all of these dreams becoming a very lived and tangible reality. But yes, as we conclude our time together, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them with us. We'd love to hear from you as we wind down. But I think also, I mean, the name of our organization is African Digital Heritage, and you also mentioned traditional knowledge and how that informs, I mean, our lived reality. So I would love to know if there's any, like if there's any like, there's Ubuntu and how that very much embodies what it means, an African philosophy that embodies collectivism, and what it means to, like, I don't exist without you existing. My reality and my future is tied up with your reality and with your future. So I'd love to know if there's any traditional philosophies or guidelines that guide this work, specifically as it relates to African philosophies, that guide what the meaning of community is for you. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I think for me, I root it on the phrase that you gave when we started, that wenda wawili, who? Wenda wawili to the audience.
Yes, well, let me sorry. Well, sorry.
Okay.
Wenda wawili kukumbushana.
Yes, kukumbushana. And for me, that's it in terms of community, because as they say in English, you can not in football English, but yeah, you can never walk alone. And also, no man is an island. You need community to help you grow. But also, if you're in the space of African culture and cultural heritage, I don't think you're going anywhere without the community, because the community is the culture and the community is the identity, and the community is the knowledge.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on this. And so we have one question, and this is from Kylie, and she would love to hear about what an ideal community of practice would look like for you.
For me, an ideal community of practice will look like people who, it's not just about sharing, but also people who come together to co-create, to collaborate, to innovate. Yeah, that's what my ideal community of practice. People who work together, not just people who share. So we can start on the sharing, but I hope that people will make connections from culture catch-up where they can collaborate with each other.
Yeah, thanks. For sure, collaboration is key. I think I've also grown so much. I think you also learn so much about yourself within collaboration. And so yes, if you have any other questions, I don't know, Mutanu, do you have any questions for me? You are asking me questions. Have you any questions for me?
Maybe what your experience has been working with communities.
Yeah, I think one fun way, because I think there are different ways, especially because my work has existed digitally. So I think it's also really interesting to think through what it means to experience community digitally. I mean, here we are doing that. But I think for me, one of the ways I enjoyed most building my work within the musical sphere with community was doing a collective playlist. And this was it was centered, yes, it was February, so it was Valentine's Day, I mean the love month. And so I think it was really lovely to think of Zilizopendwa songs and having people share what are some of your favorite love songs from between the 1960s to the 1980s, and kind of build that collective conversation on musical histories and love songs that have existed. And I think for me, that collective playlist for me was a really fun way of going about building histories together. And so I have another question for you, and this one is from Audrey. And she asks, how do you envision the growth of ADH's culture catch-up over the next 5 to 10 years?
Ooh.
Or rather, not the culture catch-up, but also the community of practice over the next 5 years. So how do you envision the growth of ADH's community of practice over the next 5 to 10 years?
Again, as I mentioned, we hope to collaborate with a lot of you, and we also hope to feature people from all over the world. But apart from that, we hope that the culture catch-up grows in such a way that we are not just meeting online, that we get to meet these people who we hosts over time in person and learn about their programs, and just build a space in a location that doesn't have too many visa restrictions, such that practitioners in the space can come together and share and laugh together above all.
Yes, yes, yes to this dream. May it be so. May it be so. And so if I think we've come to the conclusion of our time together. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to find out more about the Culture Catch-Up, feel free to find us on our socials at African Digital Heritage. We have a newsletter that we'll be releasing, will be coming out soon at the end of the month. Yes, the Culture Catch-Up is a two-part project that features one part being the public history talks, the other one being the newsletter. So look out for that, and this should be shall be shared with you at the end of the month. And so thank you so much for being here. As usual, if you have any questions, we are more than willing to answer them over our socials and on our website, which is africandigitalheritage.org. And thank you so much, Mutanu, for being here, for presenting, for sharing so beautifully about what you have, what you envision the Culture Catch-Up to look like, what it means to do this work with care, and really what your hopes and dreams are for community. I really, really appreciate this. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise, for putting together this beautiful presentation. And thank you so much to you, the audience, for being here once again. Thank you for taking time out of your Thursday evening to share space with us. And I think that's it. My name is Wairimú. I've been your moderator, and yes, thank you.
Wairimú. Bye.
Bye.